The envelope on her desk was thinner than a resume. It wasn't a resume. "My loves, come closer. I want you to see this one with me." 7:52 in the morning. 41st floor of Pemberton Holdings. Alexis Turner, 24, black, executive secretary to the boardroom for 4 years. Yellow blouse, brown skirt, board packets stacked in the exact order she stacked them 1,000 mornings before. She doesn't know yet. Down the hall, the new CEO is already writing names on a list. Ethan Caldwell, blonde, blue-eyed, ice in the smile. By 10:30, he's fired 4 black senior employees. By 11:14, he calls Alexis into the glass office, looks her up, looks her down. Some people simply don't belong in certain environments. 2 executives in the room, neither speaks. Aigu. She walks to the executive bathroom, locks the door, pulls out her phone. 1 call, 1 sentence to the man on the other end. A man with a black dragon curling up the left side of his neck. Kang Junho. They call him the Quiet One. And nobody, my loves, nobody calls him for nothing. She makes him promise. Nobody gets hurt. A black Sikorsky is already turning toward the helipad, and what lands on that roof is not what any of them are expecting. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Alexis Turner slid the last board packet into place at 7:52 a.m., and then, because the corner of the folder had bent on the ride up the elevator, she pressed it flat with the side of her thumb until the paper forgot it had ever been folded. 12 packets, 12 chairs. 1 small silver pitcher of ice water at the head of the long walnut table. 4 years of mornings had taught her that the pitcher belonged 3 finger widths from the edge, that the pens went cap up on the right, and that Mr. Anselm liked his packet turned so the tab faced the window. She turned it. She stepped back. She looked at the room the way a woman looks at a photograph she has taken before it is developed, checking for the small flaw that will bother her later if she leaves it. The 41st floor of Pemberton Holdings was quiet at that hour in a particular way, not empty, waiting. The building itself seemed to hold its breath between the last of the cleaning crew and the first of the analysts, and Alexis had grown used to that hush, the way a night nurse grows used to the sound of a monitor. She heard the low hum of the ventilation. She heard the small crackle of her own heels on the marble as she crossed to the credenza. She did not hear anyone else yet, and that was the point of arriving at 7:52. Her yellow blouse sat neatly under the medium brown tube skirt, and the silver badge at her waist caught the boardroom light and threw it once against the glass wall. She reached up and pulled her braids forward, over her right shoulder, out of the way of the badge. Copper reflections moved through the dark brown. She had done that same small gesture 1,000 times. On the credenza, her purse was closed. Inside the purse, in the small zipped pocket meant for coins, was a thin gold chain. On the thin gold chain was a wedding band she had not worn on her finger in 4 years. Not once inside this building, not at the elevator, not at the coffee cart, not in the boardroom, not in the copy room, not in the corridor where the founder himself had once stopped to compliment her on her handwriting. The band lived in the pocket lived in the purse lived on the credenza. It was a system that had never failed her, because she had never allowed it to. She checked her watch. 7:56. Rebecca would be here at 8:10. Rebecca was always 10 minutes late, and Alexis had learned, over 4 years, to file that fact under management rather than complaint. She opened the small ledger she kept in the top drawer of the credenza, wrote 7:52, boardroom set in a neat, unhurried hand, and closed it again. Then she saw the light. It came from the corner office at the end of the corridor, thrown against the frosted glass in a long, dull rectangle. The corner office had belonged to Walter Pemberton for 31 years, and after Walter Pemberton had retired 11 weeks ago, it had belonged to no one. The light had not been on at 7:52 a.m. for 11 weeks. It was on now. Alexis stood very still for a moment. She let her hand rest on the drawer she had just closed. Then she straightened her blouse at the hem with 2 fingers and walked, at her normal pace, toward the corner. The door was open. Ethan Caldwell stood at the window with his back to her. He was tall in a lean, athletic way that suggested a rowing team and a private trainer, and his blonde hair was side-parted with the sort of precision that belongs to men who take a photograph of themselves in the mirror before they leave the apartment. He wore an anthracite gray suit that had been cut for him and only for him. His hands were in his trouser pockets. He was looking at the skyline the way a man looks at property. "Mr. Caldwell," she said it from the doorway, not stepping in. "Welcome. I'm Alexis Turner. I set the boardroom for the 10 o'clock. Is there anything you need before Ms. Hollis arrives?" He turned. He took his time turning. His ice-blue eyes moved from her face down to her badge, across her waist, over her hips, back up to her face. It was not a glance. It was an inventory. "Turner," he said. He said her last name as though he were tasting a wine and had decided, in the first sip, not to buy the bottle. "You've been here how long?" "4 years, sir." 4 years. He nodded once. He did not smile. He turned back to the window. "That'll be all." She held the doorframe for a second longer than she needed to. Then she stepped back into the corridor and pulled the door softly closed. In the reflection of the frosted glass, she watched him lift his phone to his ear, and she watched his lips shape a name she could not read. At 8:10, Rebecca Hollis came off the elevator with 2 coffees, one for herself and one that Alexis knew, without asking, was for Ethan. Rebecca's dark blonde hair was pulled into the low ponytail she had worn every day of the 11 months she had been Ethan's assistant at the last firm, and her hazel eyes flicked once to Alexis's badge and then away, in the small, nervous way of a person who has been given a script that morning and has not yet decided how she feels about the lines. Morning. Rebecca did not stop walking. He wants the 10 o'clock moved up. 9:30. 9:30. Alexis matched her stride. The full board? Just the executive committee. And he'll want a printed org chart on the table. Names and photos. Every floor. Every floor is 38 departments. Every floor. Rebecca disappeared into the corner office and closed the door behind her. Alexis stood in the corridor, with the smell of the second coffee still in her nose. Then she walked back to the boardroom, took the 12 packets off the table, put them in the credenza, and started over. By 9:14, she had the org chart printed, bound, and laid at the head of the walnut table. Names and photos. Every floor. Beside it, she placed the executive committee packets, 4 this time instead of 12. She turned Mr. Anselm's so the tab faced the window. She pressed the same bent corner flat with the same thumb. It was a small ritual, and she leaned on it. At 9:28, the executive committee walked in. Richard Anselm first, silver-gray hair combed back, dark navy 3-piece, burgundy tie, sharp gray-blue eyes that took the room in a single sweep and did not settle. 2 other board members after him. Then Ethan, last, unhurried, the way a man enters a room he already believes he owns. Alexis stood by the credenza, water pitcher within reach, and folded her hands. Ethan did not open the packet. He tapped the org chart with 2 fingers. Delilah Franklin, 9 years, senior accounts analyst, 9th floor. "Correct," Rebecca said from the corner, tablet in hand. Marcus Whitfield, 11 years, head of building security, ground floor. "Correct." Reginald Cross, 7 years, IT infrastructure, 12th floor. "Correct." Yolanda Meeks, 6 years, procurement, 14th floor. "Correct." Ethan closed the chart. He did not look at Anselm. He looked at the tab facing the window that Alexis had turned that way. "Restructure," he said. By 10:30, Severance Standard, escort out. Anselm's gray-blue eyes went from the chart to Ethan and back. He set his pen down flat. Ethan, these are 4 of our longest-serving people. Which is precisely the problem. Ethan smiled at last. It was the small curl of the lip that certain men produce when they have practiced looking generous. The company has calcified. New leadership requires new arteries. HR has already been briefed. Briefed by whom? By me. Alexis did not move. Behind her, the water in the silver pitcher shivered once when the elevator down the hall released a heavy load. She felt the movement of it against her hip through the credenza. Aigu, she thought, in a voice that was not entirely her own and had lived in her ear for years. Aigu. She held her hands folded. Anselm looked at the 2 other members. They looked at their packets. Neither of them opened a mouth. Anselm exhaled slowly through his nose and, without lifting his eyes, said, "We'll review this at the full board." "Of course." Ethan stood. By 10:30, he walked out. Rebecca followed. The 2 silent members followed. Anselm remained a moment longer, one hand flat on his unopened packet, and then he stood too, and as he passed the credenza he glanced at Alexis and let the glance land, briefly, on her face. He said nothing. He walked out. Alexis picked up the pitcher. Her hand was steady. She poured a glass she did not intend to drink, and then she set the pitcher back down 3 finger widths from the edge. She was already walking toward the 9th floor when she heard the first raised voice in the elevator lobby. Delilah Franklin came out of Ethan's office at 10:02 with a small cardboard box in her arms. The box contained a coffee mug printed with a child's drawing, a framed photograph turned face down against the mug, a small silver hoop that had fallen out of her ear when she had removed her lanyard, and a post-it note in her own handwriting that said, in blue ballpoint, "Remember Tuesday call." Her navy pantsuit was still crisp. Her cream blouse was still buttoned to the collar. Her low bun had not moved. Her warm brown eyes had a wet gloss to them that she was not letting travel any further than the surface. She did not stop when she saw Alexis. She said, low, 9 years, and kept walking. Alexis followed her 3 steps toward the elevator, then stopped. She had learned, over 4 years, that some dignities are private and can be ruined by an audience of 1. She let Delilah go. Marcus Whitfield was next. Alexis found out because she heard his radio, and then she heard the absence of his radio. He came out of the security office on the ground floor without the radio on his belt, without the silver crest on his shirt, still in the black uniform, but with the shoulder patch removed, and a small pale square where the patch had been. He walked past the front desk. He nodded once to the desk clerk. He did not look up at the cameras he had spent 11 years pointing at other people. Alexis had come down for a coffee she did not want. She stood by the lobby fountain and watched him cross the marble. When he passed her, he slowed a half step. He did not look at her. "Turner," he said, very quietly, at the level of a man who has been speaking into a radio for 11 years and knows exactly how far his voice will carry. "Watch your back today." Then he was through the revolving door and gone. By 10:31, 4 names had been walked out of the building. By 10:47, the corridor on the 41st floor was silent again in that particular waiting way. Alexis had returned to the credenza. She had picked up her ledger. She had written, in the same neat, unhurried hand, 10:31, Franklin, 10:39, Whitfield, 10:42, Cross, 10:45, Meeks. She had closed the ledger. She had put it back in the top drawer. At 11:12, the phone at her desk rang. Rebecca. 2 words. "He's ready." Alexis stood. She adjusted the badge at her waist. She pulled her braids forward over her right shoulder. She walked, at her normal pace, down the corridor to the corner office. Rebecca was inside, tablet in hand, standing a step behind Ethan's shoulder. A second executive, one of the silent ones from the 9:30, sat in the client chair, with his knees crossed and a folder open on his lap. He did not look up when Alexis came in. Ethan was standing at the window again. He turned. He took his time turning. His ice-blue eyes moved from her face down to her badge, across her waist, over her hips, back up to her face. It was, for the second time that morning, an inventory. Turner. Sir. 4 years. Yes, sir. He tilted his head, small, as if considering a painting he was about to buy or return. Then he made the small curl at the corner of his lip again. It was not a smile. It was the shape of a smile assembled for the benefit of the man in the client chair, who still did not look up. Some people, Ethan said, simply don't belong in certain environments. The office was very quiet. Rebecca's tablet made no sound. The executive in the chair turned a page in his folder without reading it. Outside the window, somewhere above the 41st floor, a helicopter passed and did not slow. Alexis felt the sentence arrive against her sternum and settle. She did not lower her eyes. She did not raise them. She kept her hands folded at her waist, the way she had kept them folded by the credenza. Am I dismissed, sir? HR will process you at noon. He turned back to the window. Ms. Hollis will walk you to your desk. Yes, sir. She turned. She walked out. Rebecca followed a half step behind, tablet held to her chest like a shield. In the corridor, Alexis passed the frosted glass, and in its dull reflection she saw, briefly, her own outline, the yellow blouse, the brown skirt, the badge at her waist, the braids on her shoulder, and she saw, behind her own outline, the shape of Rebecca's ponytail. She did not stop walking. She reached her desk. She opened her top drawer. She took out the small ledger. She put it in her purse. She closed the drawer. You have until noon, Rebecca said, at a volume calibrated to be heard by exactly one other person. I know, Alexis said. I'm sorry. It came out fast and low, and Rebecca's hazel eyes went past Alexis to the corner office and back, and then away. Alexis picked up her purse. She held it against her hip. She did not answer. She walked, at her normal pace, past the boardroom she had set at 7:52. She walked past the credenza with the silver pitcher 3 finger widths from the edge. She walked to the end of the corridor, to the door marked private on the 41st floor that led to the executive bathroom, and she went in. She locked the door behind her. There was one long counter, one long mirror, 3 sinks, a small padded bench upholstered in cream leather along the wall. She set her purse on the bench. She stood in front of the mirror. She looked at the woman in the yellow blouse and the brown skirt with the silver badge at her waist and the copper reflections in the dark brown braids on her shoulder, and for a moment, she and the woman in the mirror studied one another like strangers passing on a street. Then she opened the small zipped pocket in her purse. She took out the thin gold chain. She lifted the chain over her head and settled it under the collar of the yellow blouse, and the ring rested against her collarbone with a small, cool weight. She had not worn it inside this building in 4 years. She wore it now. She took out her phone. She unlocked it with her thumb. Her thumb was steady. She scrolled to the second name in her favorites. The first was her mother, and she pressed it, and she lifted the phone to her ear, and she listened to it ring once, and then twice, and then she heard the small dry click of a line picking up on the other end of a city. He did not say hello. He never did. Yobo, he said, quiet. Alexis stood in front of the mirror in the executive bathroom on the 41st floor of Pemberton Holdings, with a ring against her collarbone she had kept in a pocket for 4 years, and she opened her mouth to speak, and she found that her voice was smooth and unhurried and did not shake at all. He said, she began, someone like me doesn't belong here. On the other end of the line, in a room she had never seen, in a chair she had chosen for him 2 Christmases ago, Kang Jun-ho set down a black pen he had been holding, and he did not move for a long moment, and then, very softly, In the low, even voice she had first heard 4 years and 11 months ago in a hotel corridor in Seoul, he said one word. Who? Alexis heard the word, and the tile behind her back went colder than it had a minute ago. Junho had said one thing. She knew that voice. It was the voice he used with waiters who dropped plates, and with drivers who took a turn he did not like. Polite, low, unhurried. It was also the voice he used the first time a man in a Seoul hotel corridor tried to close a door on her 4 years and 11 months ago. Steady, curious, already deciding. She pressed the phone closer to her ear. Yobo, she said, listen to me before you answer. On his side, silence. She could hear the small room around him, the low tick of the wall clock she had picked out, the soft creak of the leather chair, nothing else. He waited. Ethan Caldwell, she said, the new CEO. He's been in the building 3 weeks. He fired 4 people this morning, all black, all senior. Then he called me in. The clock ticked. He looked at me the way a man looks at furniture he's decided to replace. He said the sentence, and he said it in front of 2 witnesses. One of them apologized to me in the hallway. The other one said nothing. She stopped. The bathroom smelled of eucalyptus soap and the faint metallic warmth of the pipes. She looked at her own hand holding the phone. The gold band on the chain had slipped forward and was resting on top of her collarbone now, cool against skin that had gone warm. I need you to promise me something. He answered without asking what. Say it. Nobody gets hurt. Physically, nobody. Not him, not the assistants, not the ones who watched and did nothing. You hear me, Junho? Not a scratch, not a broken finger, not a hospital visit that gets called an accident. The pause on his end was a full breath. Alexis. Promise it, out loud, in English. I promise no one will be physically harmed. In Korean too. She heard the small sound of him lifting his chin. Yaksoke. Yaksokai. She closed her eyes. The tile behind her back was still cold, and she was grateful for it, because it was the only thing in the room that was not shaking. Good. Alexis. Yes. Where is your ledger? She almost smiled. She had told him about the ledger once, months ago, over tea at their apartment, and he had listened the way he always listened, which was the way a man listens when he is memorizing, the little brown book she had kept for 4 years. Every meeting, every anticipated shift, every closed-door decision she had assembled the packets for. Names, dates, times, room numbers. She had told him she kept it because a woman like her, in a room like that, had to keep receipts. He had nodded once and never brought it up again. In my bag. In the building. Yes. Bring it home tonight. I was going to. Alexis. Yes. The 2 witnesses. Which 2? She hesitated only because she wanted to be exact. Rebecca Hollis, his assistant, and a man from the executive committee, gray suit. I don't have his name yet. Anselm was in the earlier meeting, at 9:30, but he wasn't there when Ethan said it. Anselm resisted? Softly. He said he would revisit at the full board. Softly, softly. He was quiet for a beat, and she could feel him arranging pieces, the way he arranged the chess set he never played, moving each one a millimeter until they sat where they belonged. The 4 who were dismissed, their names, she told him. Delilah Franklin, 9 years. Marcus Whitfield, 11. Reginald Cross, 7. Yolanda Meeks, 6. As she said each name, she felt the weight of that word, years, the way it stacked up in a room, and how easily it had been swept off a desk this morning by a man in an anthracite suit. Marcus Whitfield, Junho said. Not a question. He was writing. He whispered something to me in the lobby before he left. He said, "Watch your back today." The pen on his end stopped moving. He knew. He knew something. CTV. Probably. Another pause. She could feel him lifting a piece from one square to another in his head. Alexis. Yes. HR will call you at noon. Yes. Go. Sit down. Sign nothing that says voluntary. Sign nothing at all. If they push a document across the table, tell them your husband's attorney will review it. Do not say my name. Say the phrase, my husband's attorney, then stand up and leave the room. Her throat tightened for the first time in the whole call, not because of the instruction, because of the word he had used. Husband. In 4 years and 11 months, he had used it out loud to her exactly twice, once at the marriage office in Incheon, once the morning after their first anniversary. He did not use it in phone calls. He used Yeobo. He used her name. He did not use the noun, because the noun implied paperwork the world had not yet been shown. He was showing it now. Jun-ho. Yes. Are you coming? The smallest sound on his end, almost a laugh, if he had ever made one. I am already on the way. The line held for 2 seconds, and then it cut. She lowered the phone. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror above the sink. A tall woman in a pale yellow blouse and a medium brown skirt, gold chain at the throat, with a ring resting on it now, dark braids gathered over one shoulder. Her mother would have said, "Fix your face." She fixed her face. She washed her hands, because her hands needed something to do. Then she unlocked the door and walked out into the corridor of the 41st floor as if nothing had happened, because on the 41st floor of Pemberton Holdings, nothing yet had. Rebecca was standing at the far end of the corridor, next to the small potted ficus. She lifted her eyes when Alexis came out, then lowered them. HR is at noon, Rebecca said. 12 sharp. I'll come get you. I know where it is, Alexis said. I'm supposed to walk you. Then walk me at 11:58. Rebecca opened her mouth and closed it. She nodded. Alexis went back to her desk. She sat down. She opened the top drawer and took out the small brown ledger and slid it into her handbag beside the zippered pocket that had held the ring for 4 years. Then she moved the mouse and looked at her monitor as if she were still going to answer emails, because 2 people from the 12th floor were walking past her station, and she did not intend to give them a story to carry back down. At 11:27, her phone lit up on the desk. A text from an unknown number. 5 words. Chopper coming. Stay at desk. She looked at it for a long moment. She turned the phone face down. At 11:31, Ji-won Park would have been landing at the private helipad on East 34th, if she had known his name yet, which she did not. She only knew what Jun-ho had told her the first year, that there was a man who carried the folder, and that if she ever saw the folder in a room, everything was already decided. At 11:38, the sound came in through the window, distant at first. A pulsing beat under the traffic noise. Rebecca lifted her head at her own desk without knowing what she was hearing. On the 9th floor, in accounts, someone paused in the middle of a sentence. On the 38th, a broker at Pemberton Advisory looked out at the Hudson and said, "Huh." Alexis did not look up. She kept her eyes on her monitor and let the sound come to her. The building had a helipad on the roof. It had been built 22 years ago for Walter Pemberton, who used it 4 times a year to go to a farm in Dutchess County that no one at the firm had ever visited. It had not been used in 11 weeks. The last man to use it had retired. The pulsing became a thump. The thump became a shape. A black Sikorsky S-76 crossed the corner of the window on the 41st floor, low enough that Alexis saw the underbelly of it before she saw the sky again. It banked and rose out of frame. She heard it settle onto the roof 3 floors above. Rebecca stood up at her desk. Was that ours? Alexis did not answer. She was reaching for her coffee cup because her hands needed something to do again. The building had a private elevator that went from the roof to the 44th floor and then, with a different key, from 44 down to the lobby. It did not stop at 41 on the way down unless someone told it to. It did not stop at 41 today. Alexis heard it hum past through the wall behind her and continue. At 11:42, Marcus Whitfield's replacement at the ground floor security desk was a man named Colton, who had been on the job for 3 weeks and did not know the names of half the tenants above the 20th floor. He was looking at his phone when the elevator arrived at the lobby. He looked up because 2 men in black overcoats crossed the marble in a way that was different from the way people usually cross the marble at Pemberton Holdings. Not slower, not faster, just entirely unbothered. The one in front was taller, dark hair combed back, long black overcoat. He carried nothing at all in his hands. The one behind him was shorter by a few centimeters, athletic, sharp dark eyes, a small earpiece in his left ear, and in his left hand, a black leather document folder pinched flat. Colton stood up. Sir, I need to see." The shorter man produced a card from inside his jacket and set it on the desk without breaking stride. Colton looked down at the card. It said, Kang Capital Holdings. It did not say guest. It said ownership representative. Colton looked back up. The 2 men were already at the elevator bank. The taller one lifted his hand, and the elevator doors opened on the freight express with the kind of timing that had been arranged. They stepped in. The doors closed. Colton picked up the desk phone and did not know who to call. On 44, the executive floor, Anselm was in his office with his door open reading the folder from the 9:30 meeting for the 3rd time. He heard footsteps in the corridor that had a quality he had not heard in years, the quality of footsteps that were not asking permission. He looked up. The taller man walked past his office without turning his head. The shorter one glanced in, met Anselm's eyes for the length of a heartbeat, and kept walking. Anselm rose out of his chair. They walked to the end of the corridor and stopped at the door of the corner office, the one that had been Walter Pemberton's and was now Ethan Caldwell's, and the shorter man stepped forward and knocked twice, evenly, and did not wait. Inside, Ethan was standing at his own window watching the same helicopter he had heard land and had assumed was for a tenant on a floor above him that he did not yet know he did not own. He turned. The taller man came in first. He did not offer his hand. He walked to the middle of the room and stopped exactly in the geometric center of the carpet, which was a small thing that Ethan noticed with the part of his brain that was still working. Then he did the thing that changed the shape of Ethan Caldwell's morning. He took off his overcoat. Slowly, he folded it once. He set it over the back of the chair that faced Ethan's desk. He was wearing a black suit and a crisp white shirt and a discreet black tie, and along the left side of his neck, from the collarbone up to the underside of his jaw, was the black ink of a curling dragon with 2 small characters at its tail that Ethan could not read. The shorter man stepped up beside him and laid the black leather folder on the corner of Ethan's desk, aligning it perfectly with the edge, the way one aligns a document that is meant to be read. Ethan looked at the folder, then at the tattoo, then at the folder again. "May I ask," he said, and stopped, because the sentence did not have an ending he could think of yet. The taller man spoke for the first time. His voice was low and unhurried, and it had almost no accent, which was somehow worse than a heavy one. Kang Capital Holdings." Ethan waited. "You will want to sit down." Ethan did not sit down. The shorter man opened the folder. Inside was one document, 6 pages. The top page bore a corporate seal Ethan had seen twice in his career, both times on deals he had lost. Below the seal, in clean black letters, was a name Ethan had assumed for 3 weeks belonged to a Cayman shell that had bought its way onto his cap table from the outside without ever touching him. Meridian Structural, LLC. Beside it, on the same line, acquired March 14th. Below that, Harborline Trust Partners, acquired April 2nd. Ashford Strand Capital, April 29th. Coventry Bay Holdings, May 11th. Fenwick Range Investments, June 6th. 5 names, 5 dates, each of them a shell Ethan had watched arrive on his cap table over the last 5 months, and each of them, he had told himself, a passive investor riding his repositioning story. None of them, he had assumed, connected to each other. At the bottom of the 6th page, on a clean white sheet with a corporate seal, was a proxy declaration. It said, in the plainest possible corporate English, that as of 11:41 a.m. Eastern Time on this date, the 5 entities above, collectively holding 51.2% of the voting stock of Pemberton Holdings Incorporated, had assigned their voting authority to a single representative. The signature at the bottom was a single Korean character followed by 2 English letters. Gang, J.H. Ethan lifted his eyes from the page. The taller man was watching him with the patience of a man who had already had this conversation 4 times in his life, and knew exactly how long it took a person to finish reading. "You bought me," Ethan said. It came out flatter than he meant it. "No," Kang Junho said. "I bought the company." Ethan opened his mouth. "You," Junho said. "I inherited." Down on 41, at Alexis's desk, Rebecca was standing at the corner of the workstation, holding a paper cup of water she had brought over as an apology she had not been asked to give. "They're saying something's happening upstairs," Rebecca said. Her voice was small. The elevator went straight to 44. Alexis took the cup of water. She set it on the desk beside the keyboard. She did not drink from it. "Rebecca?" "Yes. At 11:58, you're going to walk me to HR." "Yes. When we come back out, whatever we come back out to, you're going to keep your job today, only if the next thing you do is bring me every printed message from Ethan's office that has a name and a photograph in it." Rebecca went very still. "Every one," Alexis said, "by 4 p.m. Rebecca's eyes filled, and she did not let them spill. She nodded once. At 11:57, Alexis stood up from her desk. She smoothed the front of her medium brown skirt with the flat of her hand. She lifted the small ledger from her handbag and slipped it into the inside pocket of her cream blazer, which she had not been wearing this morning, and which she took now from the back of her chair and put on. The gold chain at her throat caught the light from the window. The ring on it caught the light too. She turned toward the corridor, and Rebecca fell into step half a pace behind her, and together they walked past the row of glass offices toward the elevator, and neither of them looked up when the private car from the roof hummed past inside the wall on its way down to the lobby, carrying a folded overcoat and 2 men who now, quietly and legally, owned the floor above their heads. The elevator doors opened at the ground floor, and the lobby noise met Alexis at the ankles. Shoes, glass, the swipe of turnstiles stopping, one by one, as heads turned. Rebecca kept half a step behind her, the way a person keeps half a step behind a coffin. The clutch under Alexis's arm held the ledger, and the ledger held 4 years. HR had not lasted long. On the 22nd floor, a woman named Priscilla had set a stapled packet in front of her and spoken about severance in the voice used for pets. Alexis had let the packet stay closed. She had said the sentence Junho gave her in the bathroom. "My husband's attorney will review this." Priscilla's pen had paused above the signature line. The word husband had bought a silence Alexis had not been permitted to buy for 4 years. At the ground floor, the lobby was doing what lobbies do when a story has decided to happen. Colton, the new security guard, stood behind the counter with his palms flat on the marble, the way a man stands when the manual he was given 3 weeks ago has run out of paragraphs. A cleaner near the revolving door stopped mopping and let the mop lean against her hip. 2 courier boys held their delivery slips like paused breath. Delilah Franklin was there. Alexis saw her first. Delilah stood by the wall of veined marble, beside the north bank of elevators, the small cardboard box balanced on her forearm, the navy pantsuit softer than it had been at 10 in the morning, as though the hours had wrung it. Beside her stood Reginald Cross, quiet in a gray sweater over his work shirt, a laptop bag at his feet. Beside him, Yolanda Meeks, lanyard already gone from her collar. They had not left the building. They had waited. Alexis understood in one look. They had been told to wait. Somebody had told them to wait. She crossed the marble slowly. Rebecca stayed a pace behind. "Alexis," Delilah said, and it came out low, the way a name comes out when the speaker has been rehearsing it in her head for an hour. "Delilah." They pulled us back in, 12:40, said we had to sign an exit acknowledgement before we could leave the premises. "Which they didn't tell you at 10:30. "They did not." Reginald cleared his throat, small, dry. "They said the badge return had to be witnessed. In the lobby, in front of the front desk cameras." Alexis let her eyes go, once, to the ceiling. There were 4 cameras visible from where she stood. 3 she could name, and 1 she could guess. She let her eyes come back down. "Where is Marcus?" "He was here at 12:10, Yolanda said. "They asked him to wait too." The revolving door began its next slow turn, and Marcus Whitfield came in from the sidewalk in a black canvas jacket that was not the uniform, because the uniform had been taken from him at 10:39, and he had gone home to change and had come back. He carried a small manila envelope in his right hand, folded over once. He walked with the shoulders of a man who had put on a canvas jacket, because a canvas jacket carried its own dignity. He did not look at Colton. Colton did not look at him. "Miss Turner," Marcus said, and stopped 3 feet in front of her. "Mr. Whitfield." He tilted his head half an inch toward the counter, and Alexis understood without a sentence that the counter was the stage they had all been called to. Priscilla from HR had come down in the private car. She stood behind Colton in a gray blouse with a folder against her chest, the folder heavier than a folder should be. Beside her, one of the 2 silent executives from the 9:30 meeting, the one with charcoal hair and no name yet, the one who had watched Ethan look Alexis up and down and had not spoken, leaned against the marble column with a phone in his palm, the phone dark, the palm patient. He was there to make sure the exit was witnessed. He was the witness Ethan had sent. Alexis walked to the counter. The others followed at her pace. "Colton, ma'am. The badges." She set her own badge on the marble, the corporate silver rectangle she had clipped to the waistband of a brown skirt at 7:49 every morning for 4 years. The magnet on the clip made the tiny sound it always made when it let go of fabric. She placed the badge deliberately, not thrown, not slid, placed, the way a woman places a wedding ring on a nightstand when she has decided to sleep in the guest room, except the ring was on her chest and the badge was the one going down. Colton picked it up with 2 fingers, the way he had been trained to pick things up. He tried to swipe it into the deactivation slot. His hand shook a little. It took 2 tries. "Franklin," Priscilla said, and Delilah stepped forward. The badge went down. Colton swiped. 2 tries again. "Cross." Reginald's badge went down. 1 try. Meeks. Yolanda's went down. 1 try. Whitfield. Marcus did not step forward. "Mr. Whitfield," Priscilla said. "Your badge, please." Marcus lifted the manila envelope. He opened the flap. He removed his badge, the head of security badge with the silver crest, and set it on the marble, and then he set something else beside it. A thin black plastic case the size of a deck of cards, and then he put his hand flat over the black case and looked at Priscilla, not at Colton, and his voice, when it came, had 11 years of building security in it. "Ma'am, I'm going to hand this badge to Miss Turner. I gave her the badge in 2009, when she was promoted to boardroom. I'm going to hand it back to her the same way I gave it to her, which is directly, in the presence of witnesses. As per the front desk protocol I wrote in 2018, and which is still, as of this morning, Section 4.2 of the Security Handbook. Priscilla's mouth opened and did not produce a sentence. The silent executive at the column looked up from his dark phone. "Sir," Colton tried, "the protocol was updated." "Not the front desk section," Marcus said, without heat. "That section still bears my signature." He picked up the badge and turned to Alexis. He did not extend it. He held it in his palm and waited. Alexis stepped up and took it. Their palms touched for the length of a heartbeat, and in that heartbeat, his thumb pressed the black plastic case into hers under the badge, and she closed her hand around both, and the badge went into the pocket of the cream blazer with the ledger, and the black case went into her clutch through the zip that only she knew the trick of. He spoke then in the voice a father uses to a daughter at a graduation, pitched to the counter and to the cameras and to Priscilla's folder. "Miss Turner, this floor has cameras in the elevator vestibule, the loading dock, the 22nd floor HR reception, the 41st floor executive corridor, and the 44th floor boardroom vestibule. All record to 2 servers, one in the building, one off-site. The off-site copy is refreshed at 1400 hours, 1 full second, which means it has not been refreshed today." The charcoal-haired executive straightened off the column. Priscilla said, "Marcus." "Ma'am, that is proprietary information. Ma'am, it is the front desk protocol, which is posted, in a laminated frame, on the wall behind your left shoulder." His eyes did not move from Alexis. "Miss Turner, watch your back today has become, since 10:39, watch your front. There is nothing left behind you that has not already happened." He stepped back. He inclined his head, once to Delilah, once to Reginald, once to Yolanda. He did not incline it to Priscilla, and he did not look at Colton. He walked to the revolving door and pushed the brass bar and went out into the sidewalk light and did not turn around. Delilah exhaled, quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Priscilla said, and her voice had a small crack in it now, and the crack was audible to everyone within 8 feet. "You will be escorted out the north entrance. Kindly follow, north entrance," Alexis said. "Yes, Miss Turner. The south entrance faces Park. The north entrance faces the service alley. The north entrance is standard exit protocol for whom?" Priscilla did not answer. Alexis turned her head 3 degrees toward the charcoal-haired executive. She had not spoken to him at 9:28. She had set a pen on his packet. She had refilled his water at 9:41. She had never known his name. She looked at him now the way she had looked at the water jar at 7:52. "Sir, would you be so kind as to state your name for the room?" His mouth moved without producing a word. "Your name." "Bertram Vale," he said, low. "Mr. Vale. You were in the room at 11:14 when Mr. Caldwell used a certain sentence in my direction. You stayed silent. That is a matter of your conscience. But I would like the record to show that you were the executive dispatched to observe our exit through a service alley. Would you like to reconsider the choice of exit?" Vale looked at Priscilla. Priscilla kept her eyes on the folder. "South entrance. Thank you." She turned, and the others turned with her, and the 4 of them walked across the marble toward the doors that faced Park Avenue and the noon light. Rebecca followed at half a pace. She had not spoken since HR. The clutch at Alexis's ribs was warmer than it had been 10 minutes earlier, because there was, now, a small black case pressed against the ledger, and both were pressed against a ring on a chain, and the chain was against skin. The revolving door turned them out. Sidewalk, cabs, the vendor with the cart of chestnuts who had been on the corner every winter for as long as Alexis had worked in the building. She did not stop for chestnuts. Delilah did. Delilah bought 4 small paper cones and paid in cash and turned and handed one to Reginald and one to Yolanda and one to Alexis and kept one for herself and it was the smallest thing anyone had done for anyone that morning, and Alexis took the cone with both hands, like it was a candle in a church. 9 years, Delilah said. I know. 11 for Marcus. I know. 4 for you. 4 and 11 months, Alexis said, and she said it so low that the wind took most of it, and Delilah did not ask her about the 11 months. Rebecca stood a pace behind, on the granite lip of the building, arms folded around her tablet, and she was looking at Alexis with an expression that had, since the 12th floor of HR, changed. It was the expression of a woman doing arithmetic. Miss Turner, Rebecca said, and Alexis turned. The messages you asked for, by 4. By 4. I can have them by 2. Alexis looked at her, once, the way you look at a person who has decided something in the last 3 minutes. 2. Where? Not my desk, not the building. There is a coffee house on 53rd called Marceline's. Small tables, back booth. Ask for the back booth in my name. Alexis Turner. Yes. Miss Turner, Rebecca's voice dropped a shade. There are more of them than what he asked me to draft. The org chart with photographs was the 3rd revision. The 1st revision had annotations. Annotations. In his hand. Alexis did not blink. She let the second pass. She let the sentence sit on the sidewalk between them like a piece of glass. Bring the 1st revision. I already made a copy. Bring it. Rebecca inclined her head half an inch, the way an executive assistant of 11 months inclines her head when she is finally, for the first time, taking a direction from the person she should have been taking directions from all along. She turned and went back through the revolving door. Alexis breathed out. The breath fogged, briefly, in the December air. She had not registered until now that it was December. Reginald chewed slowly, the way a large, quiet man chews when he is trying not to cry in public. Yolanda was crying without sound, a slow, bright line down each cheek she was not wiping away. What do we do now? Yolanda said, and her voice had a child in it. Alexis looked up. The Sikorsky was gone from the helipad. She could see the edge of the pad from the sidewalk, 44 floors up, and the pad was empty. Somewhere above the 44th floor line, the elevator that did not stop at the 41st was still moving, or was descending to the loading dock. She did not know. She was not, for the first time in 4 years, at her desk to watch it move. We eat the chestnuts, she said. Then we go to Marceline's, back booth, 2 o'clock. Us? Delilah said. All of us. And bring anyone else who was walked out of a building this morning, wearing something other than the reason on their termination letter. How many are there? Reginald asked. Since Caldwell took over, 19. 19. Delilah repeated it low, tasting it. I have a list in the ledger, 19, since the 3rd of October, 11 Black, 4 Latina, 2 Asian women over 50, 1 Muslim man from procurement, 1 trans engineer from IT. 11 of the 19 were making above the median for their band. Reginald's chewing stopped. How long have you had that list, Turner? He said. Since the 5th of October. Why? Because at 7:52 in the morning, I set 12 packets on a table, and one of them belonged to a man who called himself the new CEO, and I have not, in 4 years, mistaken a name at a place setting. The wind lifted a paper napkin off the chestnut cart. Delilah caught it against her thigh without looking down. Alexis's phone buzzed once inside the clutch. She did not check it. She knew, already, without checking, that the message was 3 words in a language nobody on this sidewalk would recognize. She knew the words because she had heard them, once, on a night in Incheon, standing in a courthouse with a marriage certificate warm in her hand and a man beside her who did not, then, wear a black overcoat. Chibe ojima, do not come home. Which, from him, tonight, meant only one thing. It meant the home he was in, at this hour, was not the apartment on 81st. It was the corner office on the 44th floor of the building behind her, and he had not left it, and he did not intend to leave it until the plate on the door had been unscrewed. She put the phone back. She lifted the chestnut cone. She held it up, once, small, in Delilah's direction. 2:00, she said. Marceline's. 2:00, Delilah answered. Reginald turned and hailed a cab. Yolanda followed him. Delilah lingered a beat longer, and then she reached across and squeezed Alexis's elbow through the cream blazer, and her fingers found, without meaning to, the edge of something rectangular in the inside pocket, and her eyes flickered down and back up, and she said nothing at all, and Alexis loved her, in that small, unnamed instant, more than she had loved anyone in the office in 4 years of arranging their pens. Delilah walked to the corner and lifted her hand for the next cab. Alexis stood alone on the sidewalk. In her clutch, a ledger, a black plastic case the size of a deck of cards, and a wedding ring on a chain that had, for the first time this morning, been touched by another human being. The sun cut slantwise off the mirrored windows across the way, and in the reflection she could see the 44th floor of Pemberton Holdings, and in that reflection, small as a match head, a figure in a white shirt without a jacket, standing at the corner window. He would have expected only that she saw. She saw. She turned east toward 53rd Street. She had 90 minutes. She used them the way her mother in Alabama had taught her. Convert grief into logistics before grief converts you. She stopped at a copy shop on 51st, took the ledger out of the blazer, asked for 2 color copies of every page, paid in cash, 1 copy bound in a plain black cover, the other left loose in a manila envelope, original back into the blazer. 2 doors down, she bought a padded mailer and wrote, on it, an address she had memorized 4 years ago and had never sent anything to, a firm on Lexington. The firm handled Kang Capital's American filings, loose copy inside, sealed, dropped into a blue USPS box on 52nd. Priority, signature required. By 1:45 she was at Marceline's, and the back booth was already dark with the shoulders of Delilah and Reginald and Yolanda, and, at the end, Marcus Whitfield, still in the black canvas jacket, with a cup of black coffee cooling in front of him, and both hands folded around it like a man warming himself at a small fire he intends to feed. Rebecca came in at 1:59. She had 2 document envelopes under her arm. She had not taken off her lanyard. Alexis slid into the booth. She set the black plastic case Marcus had passed her in the lobby onto the table between the coffee cups. Marcus looked at it and looked away. "What is on it?" Reginald asked. "Everything," Marcus said. "Corridor cameras, 4-1 through 4-4. 8 days back. Sound is only on the elevators, but the elevators is where he does most of the talking." Alexis put her hand flat on top of the case. "By 4:00, she said, "we will know what Ethan Caldwell said in an elevator on the 5th of October at 10:41 in the morning, which was 1 hour and 9 minutes after he was handed the office keys, and which was the moment, if I know the man at all, that he told someone what he intended to do to this company, and which was the moment we can prove he intended it." Nobody spoke. Marcus lifted his coffee cup once and drank. Outside, on 53rd Street, a black car with a discreet plate slowed at the curb and did not stop. A man in the back seat did not turn his head. He did not need to. The window of the back booth of Marceline's faced east, and the black car passed east, and inside the car a phone screen lit briefly, and above a corner office 44 floors up in a building 6 blocks north, a hand set a phone face down on a desk that had, until 11:41 that morning, belonged to somebody else. The back booth of Marceline's smelled of coffee and cinnamon and the wax of the small candle in the middle of the table, and Alexis lifted her hand off the black plastic case and slid it, gently, across the wood, toward Delilah. 9 years, she said. Delilah looked at her. Play it. Delilah slid the black case toward her and clicked it open. The screen inside was smaller than a paperback and older than anything sold new. She turned the wheel with the pad of her thumb. October 5th, 10:41 in the morning. Elevator Bank C, 44th floor. The audio came through the tiny built-in speaker, thin and metallic, and everyone in the back booth leaned in the same 3 inches at the same time, the way people lean toward a stove when the pilot light won't catch. Ethan's voice arrived first, mid-sentence, the way real recordings always begin. By Christmas, we'll have moved 11 of them. The optics team wants 20. I said 20 is a lawsuit, 11 is housekeeping. A second voice, older, drier, unfamiliar, and the analyst on 9. No. Franklin, 9 years, she's the model. If she goes without a sound, the rest go without a sound. And the girl on 41. A pause. Delilah's thumb hovered above the wheel. The pause on the recording lasted 3 seconds. Marcus counted them under his breath like a boxing referee. The girl on 41 is decoration. She stays till the vote clears. After the vote, whoever the buyer sends up there won't want a decoration that talks to the founder's daughter at the Christmas party. The older voice made a sound that was almost a laugh. You're sure the buyer wants what we said the buyer wants? Meridian's already in. Harborline signs Thursday. By June, the block is ours to move. Sell it in pieces. Sell the building. Park the pension in the Caymans. We're paid before anyone reads a filing. The recording clicked off. Delilah's thumb was still hovering. Reginald set his coffee down without drinking. Yolanda pressed a napkin flat under her palm, as if it were a document she needed to keep from lifting off the table. Rebecca had gone the color of old paper. Marcus, who had heard this file already in the small hours of Sunday morning, and had made himself listen to it 4 more times to be sure of what he was carrying, only closed his eyes and opened them again. Alexis took the case from Delilah's fingers, closed it, and set it back inside the clutch. She turned to Rebecca. The revision, with the handwriting, now. Rebecca slid the first envelope across the table. Alexis broke the seal with her thumbnail and drew out 3 sheets of the org chart, the version Ethan had been mailed on his second morning in the building. Down the left margin, in the same block capitals he used on cards at Christmas parties, were his own annotations. Beside Delilah's photograph, too familiar. Beside Marcus's, too central. Beside Reginald's, okay for 12 months. Beside Yolanda's, replace Q2. Beside a face on the 41st floor that Alexis did not need to look at twice. Keep until sign OFF. She folded the sheets once and slid them into the ledger inside her blazer. She did not read them out. Everyone at the table had read them at the same time she had. 14:38, Marcus said. He turned his wrist, just enough for the silver watch to catch the coffee shop light. Off-site update in 22 minutes. We'll be back before it runs, Alexis said. Delilah looked up. Back where? The 44th. Board meeting. I'm calling it now. Reginald let out a breath that was almost a whistle. You can't call a board meeting. I can't. Anselm can. Alexis was already keying the number. And Anselm will. She stepped out to the sidewalk to speak. The others watched her through the window, phone at her ear, weight on her back heel, free hand in the blazer pocket where the ledger lived. She spoke for less than 90 seconds. When she came back in, she said, 15:15, 44th floor, all directors present or on the line. He said yes before I finished the second sentence. Marcus rose. I'll bring in Whitfield's copy. Straight to the boardroom vestibule. No lobby detour. Sub-basement freight. Colton doesn't have that key ring. He doesn't. Yolanda pulled her coat on with the flat competence of a woman who had spent 9 years reading procurement contracts twice. I'll ride up with you. 2 witnesses of custody on the drive is better than 1. Reginald was already dialing the outside counsel whose card Alexis had passed him in the elevator vestibule at 12:51. "I'll meet you at the vestibule with the injunction ready to file if the vote goes sideways. If it doesn't, we tear it up." Delilah stood last. She looked at Alexis the way she had looked at her at 10:02 that morning in the hallway, when she was carrying a cardboard box of 9 years. 9 years plays now, then, now. They left in 3 pairs, 2 minutes apart. Rebecca stayed with Alexis to walk the block back to the building together. On the sidewalk, Rebecca said, low, without turning her head, the two who sat in with him at 9:30, Bertram Vale and Ellis Warwick from Strategy. Warwick has been sending drafts to a personal address at a domain I traced to Meridian. How many drafts? 22 since October 8th. Bring them. They're already in the second envelope. Alexis nodded once. They walked the last block in silence, the alliance on the chain moving very slightly against her collarbone with every step. They came in through the Park Avenue doors together at 15:07. Colton was no longer at the desk. A woman in a blazer that did not belong to Pemberton stood behind the counter with a clipboard and a Kang Capital lanyard, and she nodded to Alexis by name without asking for a badge. The elevator on the far right was held open by a hand in a matte black cuff. G1 Park stepped aside for her and pressed 44. The car rose. Neither of them spoke for 11 floors. On the 22nd, G1 said, in careful English, "He is in the boardroom. He asks that you enter last." "Tell him yes." "He asks one more thing." G1's eyes stayed on the doors. "He asks that you decide whether he is introduced as Kang Jun-ho of Kang Capital or by the other name." Alexis looked at the numbers climbing. 31, 32. "The other name," she said. G1 inclined his head half an inch and touched the earpiece. The doors opened on 44 to a hallway she had walked 10,000 times. The plaque at the end of it still read, Ethan Caldwell, in brushed steel, screwed into walnut. She passed it without looking. Anselm was in the vestibule outside the boardroom with a hand on the door. He was already old at 8 this morning, and he was older now. When he saw her, he straightened by an inch he had not used in a week. "Miss Turner." "Chairman." "I owe you a sentence. You owe me a vote. Say the sentence after." He nodded. He opened the door. 12 directors sat around the walnut. 2 were on the wall screen from London and Singapore. The London one already knotting his tie in real time. Ethan sat at the far end in his own chair, hands flat on the table, jaw set in the way of a man who has been told the room is his and is choosing to believe it for 11 more minutes. Bertram Vale sat 2 chairs down from him. Ellis Warwick sat 1 chair from that. Both of them looked at the door when it opened, and both of them looked away when they saw who had come through it. At the head of the table, in the chair Walter Pemberton had used for 31 years, sat a man in a white shirt with the sleeves buttoned at the wrists, no jacket, no tie, black hair combed back, the small hanja at the base of his collar, just visible above the fabric. He did not stand when Alexis came in. He did not need to. Every other person in the room was standing already except Ethan. Alexis walked the length of the table without hurry and set the ledger on the walnut. She set the org chart with the handwritten margins beside it. Rebecca placed the second envelope beside that. Marcus, who had come up the freight 3 minutes earlier, set a laptop already queued to the elevator audio on the far end. Reginald placed a bound printout of the coordination emails at Warwick's elbow without looking at Warwick. Yolanda placed the procurement addendum showing 3 contracts routed through Meridian's Delaware shell in front of Anselm. Anselm cleared his throat. For the record, this is an emergency session called under Section 9 of the bylaws. Present are all 12 directors and, at the invitation of the majority owner of record as of 11:41 this morning, Mr. Kang Jun-ho of Kang Capital Holdings, whose 51.2% voting position is verified in the folder before each of you. He paused. He looked at Alexis across the length of the room. He gave her the sentence. And I owe Miss Turner the following. This morning at 9:32, in this room, I heard a plan I should have interrupted at 9:33. I did not. My name goes on the record beside that failure. He sat. The London director on the screen said, "Play the audio." Marcus pressed a key. The recording came through the boardroom speakers, cleaner than it had come through the tin speaker in the case at Marceline's. Ethan's voice filled the walnut. 11 of them. Housekeeping. The girl on 41 is decoration. Sell it in pieces. Park the pension in the Caymans. When it clicked off, nobody spoke for 6 seconds. The Singapore director on the screen said, "Play it again." Marcus played it again. When it clicked off the second time, Bertram Vale put both hands flat on the walnut and pushed his chair back an inch, as if the table itself had done something to him. Ellis Warwick did not move his hands at all. The stillness of his hands was its own confession. Anselm said, "Mr. Warwick, the email log." Reginald slid the bound printout the last 4 inches to Warwick's fingers. Warwick did not open it. He did not need to. His name was on every 3rd page, and he knew which pages. Anselm turned to Ethan. "Mr. Caldwell." Ethan produced a smile that did not fit his mouth. "Chairman, the audio is out of context. The document trail is a fabrication assembled by a fired secretary and a fired guard. Miss Turner is not fired. Mr. Whitfield's dismissal was rescinded by the majority owner at 11:43 today. You have 12 directors in this room, Mr. Caldwell. Try again." Ethan's smile stayed where it was. "This is a hostile action by a foreign buyer working through a domestic operative to seize." The door at the back of the boardroom opened. Walter Pemberton walked in. He was thinner than he had been 11 weeks ago, and there was a soft blue pocket square in his light gray jacket, and his hand shook a little on the walking stick. He did not sit. He stood at the foot of the table across from Junho, and he looked at Alexis for a long moment, and his mouth did the thing old men's mouths do when they see a person they have loved and failed in the same breath. "I recorded a message on the 9th of October, he said. "I gave it to my daughter to hold until it was needed. It appears to be needed." Anselm nodded to the screen at the wall. A video came up. Walter, in the same jacket, in his own study at the farm, 3 months younger. To the board of Pemberton Holdings. On the 3rd of August of this year, I signed and sealed a recommendation for the promotion of Alexis Turner from Executive Secretary of the Boardroom to Director of Corporate Operations, effective the 1st of January. The recommendation was based on 4 years of documentation I kept personally, including her authorship of the restructuring memo signed under my name in June, and the vendor consolidation that saved this company $9.1 million in the fiscal year. I placed the signed recommendation in the top left drawer of the founder's desk on the 44th floor. If it is not in that drawer, it has been removed. If it has been removed, the person who removed it is the person you should be looking at right now. The video ended. Anselm walked to the founder's desk, which was 15 feet from the head of the boardroom. He opened the top left drawer. He drew out an empty folder with a black wax seal that had been broken and reset with tape. He held it up. Ellis Warwick's hands finally moved. They went to his face. G1 stepped forward and set one final document on the walnut in front of Anselm. The signed original, he said, was retrieved from a filing cabinet at Meridian Structural's Delaware office at 04:20 this morning. Chain of custody is documented on the reverse. He slid the paper across. Anselm read it. He nodded. He passed it to the director on his right, who read it and nodded and passed it on. It went around the walnut without a word spoken. When it came back to Anselm, he set it flat. "Motion," he said, "for the immediate removal of Ethan Caldwell as Chief Executive Officer of Pemberton Holdings, for cause, effective now, 2nd. Second, said the London screen. All in favor? 12 hands went up around the walnut. 2 hands went up on the screens. Ellis Warwick's hand did not go up because Ellis Warwick's hands were still over his face. Bertram Vale's went up half a second late and stayed up. Opposed. Ethan's hand rose. It rose alone. The motion carries 13-1. Mr. Caldwell, your access is terminated as of this moment. Security is in the vestibule. Marcus opened the door. 2 men in Pemberton black stood in the hall. Neither of them was Colton. Both of them worked for Marcus. Ethan stood. He looked once around the room for a face that would meet his eyes. He did not find one. He walked the length of the walnut and past Alexis without looking at her, and out through the door Marcus was holding. The door closed. Anselm turned to Alexis. Miss Turner, in light of the founder's recommendation, and in light of the majority owner's stated preference, this board would like to offer you, on this vote, the chair Mr. Caldwell has just vacated. Jun-ho, at the head of the table, said nothing. He was looking at her the way he had looked at her once in a hotel corridor in Seoul when she was 20 and lost, and asked him in bad Korean where the elevator was, and he had answered in worse English, and neither of them had walked away. Alexis put her hand flat on the ledger in front of her. No. Anselm blinked once. No. I will not take the chair of a man who was removed for a crime against the people I worked beside. I will not take it 3 hours after he named me decoration on a recording, because if I take it now, the story will be that the wife of the majority owner took the seat her husband bought her. I will not carry that story, and neither will this company. She paused. The room was very still. What I will do, I will chair an independent commission, effective tonight, to review every termination and forced resignation in this building since the 3rd of October. 19 names. I will bring back every person wrongfully removed, with back pay, and with the title they held or the title they were promised, and I will do it inside 60 days. The commission will report to the chairman, not to me, and not to Kang Capital. When it is done, I will return to the desk on the 41st floor. If, after that, this board wishes to promote me on the record my predecessor already wrote, then this board will do so by merit, in daylight, without my husband in the room. Anselm let a small breath out through his nose. So moved. Second, said Singapore. All in favor. 14 hands. Carried. Anselm turned to Jun-ho for the first time. Mr. Kang, the majority owner's preference. Jun-ho spoke for the first time since the door had opened. His English was quiet and even, and his accent moved through it like water through a clean pipe. The majority owner's preference is my wife's preference. The majority owner has none of his own in this room. He stood. He inclined his head half an inch to the board and a full inch to Walter Pemberton. He walked the length of the walnut to Alexis and stopped 1 pace away. He did not touch her. He did not need to. Every director in the room and both of the screens now knew what the chain at her collar was, and none of them would ever forget. 당신이 옳았어, he said low. You were right. About what? About the promise. Nobody was hurt. She let the smallest smile of the day rest at the corner of her mouth for 1 second, and then she put it away. Go home, Jun-ho. I have 19 calls to make. 집으로 와, he said. Come home. Tonight. He inclined his head again and walked out. Anselm adjourned the meeting at 15:41. Alexis worked in the boardroom until 9 that evening. Delilah sat 2 chairs down and worked with her. By 7:48, the first 4 calls had been made. By 9:17, the 17th had been made. The 18th and 19th were on planes and would be called at dawn. At 9:20, she took the elevator to 41 alone. She walked to the corner office. The plaque on the door still read, Ethan Caldwell. She did not touch it. She walked past it to the drawer in her own desk, where she kept the small toolkit she had used on Christmas Eve 4 years ago to fix a loose leg on a client's chair. She took the Phillips head. She walked back to the plaque. 2 screws. She turned the top one first. The brushed steel came away from the walnut in her hand, and she caught it before it hit the carpet. She turned the bottom one. She set both plates on the desk inside the office and closed the door behind her without looking in. She did not put a new plate up that night. She did not have one made for 4 months. On the 12th of April, on a Friday, at 7:52 in the morning, she came in from the Park Avenue doors, carrying 2 cups of coffee and 1 small envelope. She rode the elevator to 41 with a maintenance man she had known for 11 years and asked after his son. On the 41st floor, she walked to the corner office. She handed the envelope to the maintenance man without a word. He took the new plate out of it and set the level against the walnut and drove the 2 screws in. Alexis Turner, President of Operations. Down the hall, the elevator opened. Nobody stepped out. Halfway down the corridor, behind the glass of the executive vestibule, a man in a black overcoat with the collar turned up watched her once and then turned and went back the way he had come, into the elevator car that had never opened its doors. The car sank without a sound. Alexis put her hand flat on the fresh plate and felt the walnut behind it, warm from the screws. She walked to her desk. She set the 2 cups of coffee down. She opened the ledger. 7:52, 12 packets, 12 chairs. She began to work. The first packet she opened that morning was not one of the 12 on the table. It was a slim manila envelope Rebecca had left under the desk lamp before 6, a red string tied around it twice, and a post-it that said only, "Read before you sit down." Alexis read it standing. 31 pages. A subpoena served to Ellis Warwick at his brownstone in Murray Hill on Wednesday at 6:10 in the morning, and a copy for the corporation to preserve every document tied to Meridian Structural, Harborline Trust, Ashford Strand, Coventry Bay, and Fenwick Range. The word preserve had been underlined in another hand. Rebecca's, probably. Alexis folded the pages back along the crease Rebecca had made, slid them into the ledger, and let out a breath that fogged the inside of the coffee lid. 7:56. She sat. The board would arrive at 8. She had asked for 8 instead of 9 because she wanted daylight on the table when she read the 2 names she planned to read. Anselm had agreed by text at 4 in the morning with a single word, proper. Marcus was already in the building, had been since 5:45, walking the freight paths himself. Rebecca came in first, no lanyard. She wore a charcoal dress and low pumps and carried 2 cups and the printed agenda in a leather sleeve. She set the second cup at Alexis's elbow, took the chair to the left, and opened her laptop to the second slide of a deck Alexis had rewritten twice at midnight. 9 and 10 are ready, Rebecca said. Legal moved 14 up. 14 is now 9. Alexis nodded. Warwick. Warwick is 9. The name landed like a stone dropped in still water. There had been no meeting since December in which the name Warwick had been the first item. That was the point. Alexis wanted the room to feel the shape of the thing without any warm-up. Delilah came in at 8:03 with a green folder and a mug of her own tea. She took the chair 2 down from Alexis, opened the folder to a tab marked April, and did not look up from it until Anselm crossed the threshold in a slate suit with a silver-gray pocket square that matched no tie in the room. He did not sit at the head. The head chair sat empty on purpose. Anselm took the chair to Alexis's right and set a small silver pen beside his cup. President, he said. The word was still new in the room. He said it plain, as if he had said it 100 times. Chairman. They did not speak again until the last director came through the door, which was Ellis Warwick's replacement on the audit committee, a woman named Priya Ramanathan who had joined last Tuesday and whose signature on the audit engagement had been notarized at 11 at night. She sat where Warwick used to sit. She placed a plain black pen at 10:02 on her legal pad. Anselm gave her the smallest nod. Alexis stood, the room stilled without her needing to ask. Agenda item 9, she said. Ellis Warwick. Rebecca advanced the slide. On the wall, a single line of type, no image, no chart, on the record. 22 drafts sent from a Pemberton domain address to a personal address linked to Meridian Structural between the 8th of October and the 18th of November. Cooperation letter received Wednesday. Charges pending. Formalities first, Alexis said. Legal will move that this board accept his resignation, delivered by his counsel on Wednesday at 3:42, and revoke every authorization tied to his signature since the 3rd of October. Priya has the amended audit charter for the vote. Priya slid a stapled document across. Anselm read the top page in the time it took to lift and set down his cup. He raised his hand. 12 hands went up around the table without pause. 2 hands rose on the TV screens from the Singapore and London feeds. The motion carried without a spoken second. Alexis marked the time on the ledger. 8:17. Item 10, she said. Meridian, Harbourline, Ashford, Coventry, Fenwick. Rebecca had rebuilt the slide from what G1's people had sent overnight. 5 columns, 5 shells. Each column had 1 green row and 1 red row. Green was recoverable stake. Red was a portion tainted by the coordination with Warwick. Alexis walked the table through the split in 90 seconds. The number at the bottom of the red column was 19.4 million. The number at the bottom of the green column was 31.8. The green stake would be transferred to a blind trust administered by Priya's committee, insulated from the majority owner, and voted only in alignment with a written policy the committee would publish within 30 days. Kang Capital would collect nothing from that block for 2 years. Motion, Anselm said. Second, said the London director on the screen, a woman named Aoife, who had never seconded anything at first pass in 11 years on the board. 14. 4. None against. Priya wrote the time on her pad, in cursive, small enough to fit under a post-it. Anselm slid a plain envelope across to Alexis. From Dutchess County. He asked me to hand it to you before 9. Alexis opened it at the corner and read 1 page. Walter Pemberton's handwriting had thinned in 4 months, but it still ran uphill on unlined paper. 2 paragraphs. The first was a plain thank you for the plate. The second was a request. He wanted, if the board would allow, to endow a small operations fellowship in his wife's name, funded from the reduction in officer compensation that would follow from Warwick's departure. 2 junior operations analysts a year, chosen by the president, salaries floored above the median of the band. He did not want it named after him. He wanted it named after her. His wife's name was Ada. Alexis read the 2 paragraphs twice. Rebecca watched her without turning her head. Delilah's fingers stopped on the tab of the green folder. Chairman, Alexis said, may we take an item off the schedule and put it on the record? Please. She read the 2nd paragraph out loud. She did not read the first. When she reached the name Ada, her voice did not tighten. She had learned, over 4 months of speaking in this room, to keep the smooth line under any weight. The vote was unanimous and did not need a second. Alexis wrote the word Ada in the margin of her ledger and drew a single thin line under it. Item 11, she said, reinstatement audit, 1st quarter. Delilah opened the green folder to the tab. 19 names down the left column, 19 dates in the 2nd column, salary bands in the 3rd, corrected upward where the original bands had been suppressed. In the 4th column, a small letter, R for retained, D for declined, T for transferred out at their own request with severance intact. 16 R2D, both of whom had gone to competitors on terms Pemberton had matched and then bettered on the way out. 1T, a paralegal who had wanted to move to her sister's town in Ohio and had asked to keep her health coverage through the summer. The board did not need to vote on this item. It was recorded, with thanks, Anselm said. A quiet followed that item, not the quiet of a rehearsed pause, the quiet of people who had waded through years of small wrongs and had just heard the sum read plainly, as a column with a total. Alexis let it hold. Then she moved on. Item 12, she said. Building security. Marcus Whitfield has recommended promotions and a rescoping. The paper is in your packets. 12 packets around the table, 12 chairs. Each packet had a green tab where the security paper began. Marcus's recommendation moved his own budget line down and moved his lieutenant's lines up. It rescoped the CTV retention from 8 days to 14 and moved elevator audio into a separate, encrypted vault accessible only by a 2-key handshake between the security lead and the president. It set a permanent standing rule that no camera in a bathroom vestibule or medical office would ever be added, no matter who asked. Motion, Anselm said. Second, Delilah said, without lifting her head from the folder. Her voice was low, dry. 30 years of budget language folded into one syllable. 14.4. Item 13, Alexis said. Executive compensation. The London feed leaned forward. Compensation had been the shape of Ethan's stated grievance, the reason he had put the org chart in front of the wrong pair of eyes and asked for a redraw. Alexis had spent a week rebuilding the schedule from the ground, with 2 outside consultants and the human resources director, who had inherited Priscilla's file. She did not raise a single salary in the top band. She lowered 3. She raised 22 salaries in the middle 3 bands, indexed to the corrected medians the reinstatement audit had exposed. She capped the president's cash bonus at half of the outgoing schedule and rerouted the difference into the Ada Pemberton Fellowship the board had just authorized. She sat when she read the last paragraph. She did not read the number that would come off her own pay. Anselm did, in a quiet voice, so the record would show it had been said aloud. Motion. Second. 14.4. At 8:58, the last item cleared. Alexis closed the ledger and folded her hands over the leather. Anselm looked down the table, and then, for the first time in her 4 months in the chair, he stood. On behalf of the board, he said, the record will note gratitude to the president for the quality of the packet, the discipline of the schedule, and the plain reading of the second paragraph. Priya wrote it down. The London director gave a small nod on the screen. The Singapore feed cut for the day. Directors began, one by one, to fold their agendas back into the sleeves. Delilah caught Alexis's eye across the table and mouthed a single word Alexis had heard her say once before, in a coffee shop back booth on the 53rd Street, when the audio from an elevator had finished playing. The word was clean. The room emptied at 9:03. Rebecca stayed. She always stayed for 5 minutes at the end. She lined the coffee cups up on the tray, unplugged the projector, and slid the empty water pitcher back to the far end of the sideboard, where it was 3 fingers from the edge, and the handle pointed at the door. He asked to come by at 11, Rebecca said. I put him on the calendar as Kang Capital, half-hour, corner office, no phones. Alexis nodded. She did not look up from the ledger. The other name, she said. I know. Rebecca left at 9:10. Alexis wrote for 20 minutes without lifting her pen. She wrote 3 thank you notes by hand, one to Priya, one to Aoife in London, one to the maintenance man whose son had, in January, been accepted to a trades program on a scholarship that had appeared in his mailbox with no name attached. At 9:43, the phone on her desk lit. Delilah from 2 doors down. Not the intercom. The direct line. Green folder, tab April, page 11. Delilah said, You will want to look at it before he comes up. Read it to me. There was a pause on the other end. Delilah was choosing which sentence to say first. That, too, was a thing she had learned to do in 4 months. She had been reinstated with back pay to the day of her dismissal and had never once, in Alexis's presence, said the word owed. Ethan filed for personal bankruptcy in Delaware on Tuesday, Delilah said. Federal charges out of the Southern District came down on Wednesday. Wire and securities. His mother posted the house. He is at his sister's in Rye. Understood. You needed to know before 11. Thank you, Del. Alexis. Yes. He is not coming near this building. I know. On the ledger, she wrote the letter E and drew a line through it. Then she wrote the number 19 and drew a small square around it. Then she closed the book. Jiwon was at the vestibule at 10:58 in a dark gray suit. He did not carry a folder. He did not need one. He inclined his head at the assistant who had replaced Rebecca in the outer chair while Rebecca was in a meeting on 22, and he stepped aside from the elevator to let Junho pass first. Junho wore the black coat with the collar down. The dragon at his neck was covered by the shirt. He carried nothing. Jiwon pulled the door of the corner office closed from the outside and stood with his back to it in the vestibule, hands loose, one eye on the elevator bank. Alexis was already standing at the window when Junho came in. She had turned to the north light on purpose. She wanted to see him without a desk between them. He crossed the room in 6 paces and stopped 1 pace short of her, the same distance he had held in the boardroom 4 months ago. Not accidental. She had asked him, on the second night, why 1 pace and not 2. He had said, in Korean, because 2 is the distance of the market. 1 is the distance of a promise. Ye-bo, he said. Junho. The board packet. 14-4, none against. He nodded once. He did not smile. He rarely smiled during the day. His smile was a night thing, behind their own door, when the coat came off and the collar of the shirt opened and the dragon rose above the fabric. In this room he was, as he had been since December, quiet in the register of the quiet one. Ada, he said. You saw. Anselm sent me the paragraph at 7. He shouldn't have. He asked first. She let that be. Anselm had asked. That was the difference between last December and this April. He had asked. Warwick's letter, Junho said. The green stake. 2 years. Blind trust. Priya's committee will publish the policy inside 30 days. Good. He did not offer her the chair he had once implied was hers. He did not need to. He had said, on the record and off, that the majority owner's preference was his wife's preference. He had not walked it back once in 118 days. He had also not, in that time, entered the corner office without an appointment on Rebecca's calendar under the name Kang Capital. He kept the 2 names separate on purpose. In this room, at this hour, he was Kang Capital. At home, on the 81st Street, at the hour the door closed behind him, he was the other name. The board asked me a thing this morning, she said. Yes. Not on the record. Anselm at the door on the way out. He wants to sit with me for lunch on Monday and float the chair of the executive committee. He wants me to say yes before he floats it. You will not say yes. I will say I will think about it, and I will not think about it, but I will say I will think about it. That is right. The corner of his mouth did move, only the corner, only for a second. It was not a smile in any language of the day. It was the small motion of a man who had, 4 years and 11 months in, learned when his wife was 2 steps ahead of a room and did not need his hand at her elbow. He looked at the window over her shoulder. From this floor you could see the copper roof of the hotel where they had met, 3 avenues away, gone green from a decade of rain. Neither of them said its name. They never had, in daylight. Tonight, she said. Yes. Early, yes. I will make the soup. He tilted his head a quarter inch. In their kitchen, there was a wooden spoon with a burn mark on the handle from a night 3 years ago. He had never replaced it. A guest had once asked why they kept a burnt spoon in a good kitchen. He had said only, "Because it stirs." "Doenjang jjigae," he said. "With the mushrooms?" "Yes." He turned. He did not touch her. He had not touched her inside this building since the day he had promised, over a phone line, that no one would be hurt. He would touch her the moment the door on the 81st Street closed behind them at 7:12 tonight, and not 1 minute before. That, too, was a rule they had made and had not broken. At the door he paused with his hand on the frame. He said one thing in Korean, softly, so soft the assistant in the vestibule would not hear it through the closed door. He said, "Jal haseo." "You did well." She said, "Jal waseo." "You came well." He left. Ji-won and Junho stepped into the elevator. The doors closed. The floor light dropped past 40, past 30, past 22, where a new director was drafting a non-retaliation policy for the audit committee by week's end. Alexis went back to the desk. She opened the ledger. Under the letter E with a line through it, under the number 19 in the small square, she wrote a new heading in the smooth, even hand she had used for 4 years to arrange 12 packets on a table. Ada Pemberton Fellowship, Year 1. She wrote 2 names beneath it. The first was a woman in accounts who had, in November, sent Delilah a file at midnight because she did not want a mistake to fall on Delilah's desk in the morning. The second was a young man in procurement who had, in January, refused to sign a contract with a vendor whose paperwork carried a Delaware address he could not verify. Alexis had never told either of them that she knew what they had done. She had, both times, waited. Below the 2 names she wrote the date, April 12. Rebecca came back with a fresh pot of coffee at 11:30. She set the tray on the sideboard, turned the pitcher's handle toward the door, and asked whether the president would like the afternoon block held for the fellowship interviews. "Yes," Alexis said. 2 o'clock. Both together. Together? Together. I want them to see each other in the room. Rebecca made a small note on her wrist with a felt pen. She had kept that habit since December. A line of notes on the skin between the outer desk and the corner office, transferred to the calendar when she sat. Alexis had not asked her to break it. A thing carried the whole way across a floor was a thing that did not get dropped. Rebecca left. The door closed. Alexis lifted the second coffee, the one Rebecca had set at her elbow at 8, still warm from the second pot, and drank half of it in one swallow. 12 packets, 12 chairs. The board's morning was done. The afternoon had not begun. She opened the ledger to the next blank page and waited. At 1:52, Rebecca knocked twice and stepped in with 2 folders and a small paper cup of water. She set the folders on the edge of the desk, not the center, and put the water on the coaster Alexis kept by the phone. She wore no lanyard. Her sleeve had a faint blue mark where the felt pen had bled through the cotton. She said nothing about it. She said the 2 candidates were in the small conference room next door, seated at opposite ends of the long table, and she had put a jug of water between them and closed the blinds 1/3. Alexis stood. She smoothed the front of the cream blazer with one palm. She tucked the ledger under her arm, the way another woman might tuck a book on a Sunday. "Together," she said. "Together," Rebecca said. They went next door. The woman from accounts sat with her hands folded on the table and her back a full inch off the chair. She was 31. Her name was Corinne Adayeze. She wore a navy dress she had bought for a cousin's wedding 2 summers ago, a small silver cross at the throat, and shoes she had polished that morning at the kitchen counter because her mother had taught her that a good shoe told a room you had prepared. The man from procurement sat at the far end. He was 28. His name was Idris Bellamy. He kept his phone face down beside a small notebook with a rubber band around it. His shirt collar had been ironed with steam, and then again with the flat of a hand. He was trying not to look at the plate on the door that read President of Operations, and failing at it in a way that made Alexis feel younger than she was. She set the ledger on the table between them. She did not open it. "Thank you for coming in," she said. "I asked for you together for a reason. I want you to know that reason before we start." Corinne lifted her chin 1 degree. Idris put his palms flat on the notebook. "Miss Adaize," Alexis said, "on the 11th of November last year, at 11 minutes past midnight, you sent a file to Delilah Franklin's personal address from a laptop in the 9th floor break room. The file was a spreadsheet with the vendor codes for the Northeast region. You had noticed that 3 of them routed through the same P.O. box in Wilmington, and that the invoices had been rounded up in a pattern that started in September. You sent it to Delilah because you were afraid to send it up the reporting line. Delilah forwarded it to my personal address that same night. I have known your name since 11:12 p.m. that Tuesday." Corinne's hands stayed folded. Her eyes moved once, sideways, then back. "Mr. Bellamy," Alexis said, "on the 17th of January, at 4 in the afternoon, you refused to countersign a service agreement with a vendor whose Delaware address matched no registered agent your team could locate. The line manager sent it to you 3 more times that week. You returned it 3 more times with the same 1-line note. On the following Monday, the request stopped. You did not tell anyone. Your line manager's assistant told me on the 10th of February because she was worried you would be moved off procurement. You have been on my list since that Wednesday." Idris breathed out through his nose. He did not look up. "I did not call you here to congratulate you," Alexis said. "I called you here to tell you what the fellowship is and what it is not. It is a 2-year appointment. It is funded by a reduction in officer compensation, approved by the board this morning. The salary is above the median of the band. You will be moved out of the roles you are in now and placed under the office of the president. You will report to me directly. You will be told what an operations problem looks like from the top, and you will be asked, in your 2nd month, to write a memo on something the company is doing wrong. The memo will be read. The memo may be acted on. If it is acted on and the action costs money and the money is well spent, you will be told. If it is acted on and the action fails, you will be told that too. It is not a promotion. It is an apprenticeship in seeing." She let the room hold the word. "It is named for Ada Pemberton," she said. "Walter Pemberton's wife. He asked for it this morning. He asked me to read the 2nd paragraph of his letter to the board. I did." 14 hands went up without a second. Corinne's throat moved. "I have one condition," Alexis said. "It is not in the paperwork. Rebecca will not put it in the paperwork. If either of you, at any point in the 2 years, sees something in this building that is wrong and does not tell me, I will end the fellowship the same day. I will do it kindly. I will do it without a mark on your record, and I will not offer it again. You may say no now. You may say yes now, and no in April. You may say yes now, and yes in April, and stay for the 2nd year. What you may not do is stay silent." Idris lifted his eyes. They were steady. "Yes," he said. Corinne's hands unfolded. She placed them flat. "Yes," she said. Alexis nodded once. She slid a single sheet across to each of them, the terms, signed already by the chairman that morning, blank for their own names. Rebecca gave them each a pen. Corinne signed with a small, careful hand, the C looping back on itself. Idris signed the way he had been taught to sign at 17, all consonants, 1 long line at the end. "You start Monday," Alexis said. 10 a.m., this office. Bring nothing. Rebecca will bring coffee. Not the felt pen, Rebecca said, and Corinne laughed once, a short surprised laugh, and Idris smiled into his notebook. They stood. They shook her hand across the table, first Corinne, then Idris. At the door Idris turned. "Ma'am," he said, and stopped, because the word had come out heavier than he meant. He tried again. Thank you for the January note. I did not know anyone had seen it. Someone always sees it, Alexis said. The building is not as blind as it looks. They left. Rebecca closed the door behind them and stood with her back against it for one long beat. Then she pushed off and picked up the paper cup of water and drank it in 2 swallows. 2:41, she said. You have 30 minutes before the safety walk on 11. Push the safety walk to Monday, Alexis said. Ask Marcus to send the lieutenant this time. Tell him it is training, not a snub. Rebecca wrote it on the inside of her wrist beside the older ink and left. Alexis sat down at the small conference table. She opened the ledger to the page where she had written the 2 names that morning and drew a small tick beside each. Under Corinne, she wrote Wilmington P.O. Under Idris, she wrote Delaware Ghost. She closed the ledger. She looked at the plate on the door for a long moment. The screws were slightly darker than the plate. The maintenance man had used the old holes and set them a hair proud, so the plate stood a millimeter off the wood. She had noticed it in the morning and decided she liked it that way. She went back to her own office. At 3:10, Anselm called from his line, not through Rebecca. He said Monday, 1 o'clock, the small dining room on 42, and he would like her to come without a folder. She said yes. He said the executive committee chair would be discussed. She said she knew. He said he did not want her to answer today. She said she would not. He said he would like her to answer on Tuesday. She said Tuesday she would say she was thinking about it. He said that was the answer he wanted to hear. He hung up before she could say goodbye. She wrote Mon 142 no folder in the margin. Then, below it, in smaller hand, 2A thinking. At 4:20, Delilah came in with a mug of tea she had not asked for and set it on the corner of the desk. She did not sit. She wore the same navy pantsuit she had worn on the day she had walked out with the cardboard box in December, which was a fact only Alexis would notice, and only for a second, and only because Alexis had noticed everything about that morning and had not forgiven herself yet for how long she had watched Delilah cross the lobby before she had done anything about it. 17 calls done by year-end, Delilah said. 19 in the room by the end of March. Fellowship signed by 2. Ethan in Rye, eating his sister's food. Walter writing letters about his wife. I would like to know how you knew about the Wilmington P.O. in November and did not say a word. Because if I had said a word in November, Ethan would have moved a piece I could not see, Alexis said, and you would have been gone by Christmas. Delilah set her hand on the back of the chair opposite the desk. She did not sit. She looked at the plate on the door through the open frame. You want me on the committee for the second Ada Fellowship year, she said. It was not a question. I want you on the committee for every year, Alexis said. The letter is on Rebecca's desk. She will bring it in the morning. Delilah nodded once. She picked up the mug she had brought and took a sip herself. She set it back down. 9 years, she said. I said it in the corridor, and I thought that was the last time I would say it in this building. I am glad I was wrong. She left. Alexis drank the tea. It was too hot. She drank it anyway. At 5:05, Marcus knocked on the frame with 2 knuckles and did not come in. He said the elevator vault was live at 4:47, 2 keys. He had the security leads. She had the president's. He held out a small brass key on a plain steel ring. She took it. It was warm from his pocket. She put it on the ring with her apartment key and the key to the desk drawer where she kept the ledger overnight. 3 keys now, where 2 had been enough for 4 years. Good night, she said. Good weekend, he said, and corrected himself. Good night. He left. At 6:10, Rebecca put a paper bag on the desk with a container of soup from the deli on the corner and said she was going. Alexis said thank you, and Rebecca said Monday and closed the door behind her. Alexis did not open the soup. She stood up. She looked out the window. The sky over the East River had gone the color of a bruise turning to skin. She counted the lights in the tower opposite. She stopped counting at 41, because 41 was the floor, and because the number had begun to mean the thing again, not the abstract thing, the floor she had walked out of in December, on Rebecca's arm with a box she would not carry, the floor she had walked back into on Monday, with 2 coffees and an envelope. She put on the coat. She took the ledger. She left the soup for the cleaning woman with a small note that read please, thank you, and a smiley face, because the cleaning woman's daughter was 7 and drew smiley faces on every note that came home from school. She took the freight down. It was faster and it was quieter, and she did not want to see the lobby tonight. The car was waiting at the loading dock. Jiwon held the door. He did not speak. She got in. He closed the door and got in the front. The driver moved the car into the westbound traffic on the block below and the block below that, and turned north on Park. They did not go straight home. At 68th, Jiwon lifted his phone and read 2 words off the screen and put it back. At 72nd, the driver slowed. The car pulled to the curb at the corner of 79th in front of a small florist Alexis had walked past for 4 years without going in. Jiwon got out. He came back with a bunch of white anemones wrapped in brown paper. He did not hand them to her. He set them on the seat beside her. He got back in the front. His idea, Jiwon said, and did not turn. I know, Alexis said, because she did. At the corner of 81st, the car stopped at the awning. The doorman she had known for 9 months and never told the truth to, opened the door and said, "Good evening, Mrs. Turner," the way he had said it in December and January and February and now April, because he had been told her name, and only her name, and would not be told the other one, and would not need to be. She said good evening back. She took the anemones. She went up. Junho was in the kitchen. His coat was on the chair by the door. His sleeves were rolled twice. The doenjang was already in the pot with the water and the mushrooms and the anchovy stock he had made on Sunday, and kept in the jar with the blue lid. The wooden spoon on the counter was the one with the burn along the handle from 3 summers ago, when she had left it on the gas ring while answering the door. He had not thrown it out. He had said, that night, that a spoon that had survived a fire was more trustworthy than a spoon that had not. She set the anemones in the sink. She would find the vase later. She took off the coat. She hung it beside his. He turned from the stove. He held the wooden spoon in one hand. He did not put it down. He looked at her the way he had looked at her in the corridor of the hotel in Seoul the second time they had met, which was the look of a man deciding, again, that the answer was still yes. She walked across the kitchen. She did not stop 1 step short. She put both hands flat on his chest and stood there. He set the spoon on the ceramic rest without looking, and put his arms around her, one hand at the small of her back, and the other flat between her shoulder blades, and said nothing, because the promise on the phone had held only inside the building, and the building was on Park Avenue, and this was 81st Street, and here the promise was different. "수고했어," he said, after a long moment. "You worked hard." "당신도," she said. "You too." They stood there until the soup began to move in the pot. He turned to lower the flame. She reached for 2 bowls from the cabinet above the stove. She set them on the counter. He ladled. She carried them to the small table by the window. He brought the rice. She brought the kimchi from the second shelf of the refrigerator, the jar her mother in Alabama had learned to make, because a daughter had married a man who preferred it to collard greens, and the daughter had said, once, on a phone call in the 2nd year, that a mother who could not feed her son-in-law was not the mother she had raised herself to be. They sat. He set a spoon in her bowl before she reached for one. She set the smaller dish of rice closer to his side of the table because he liked to eat rice into the soup rather than beside it. Neither of them said grace. Neither of them ever had. They ate. Halfway through, she told him about Corinne and Idris. She told him about the small, careful C and the long consonant line. She told him about the condition she had put on the fellowship, the one that was not in the paperwork. He listened without interrupting. When she was done, he set his spoon down and said, "Ada would have liked that condition. She said she thought so too." She told him about Anselm and Monday at 1 and Tuesday thinking. He smiled the same half-smile from the morning. He said, "Tuesday thinking is a good answer for a Tuesday." She said, "It is the only answer I have for Anselm, ever." He nodded. She did not tell him about Delilah. Delilah was a thing between her and Delilah. He did not ask. After dinner he washed. She dried. She put the anemones in the tall glass vase that had been a wedding gift from his aunt in Busan, and she set them on the sill above the sink, where the morning light would find them first. He wiped the counter with a folded cloth. She turned off the burner light. The kitchen went quiet, in the way that kitchens go quiet when the work is done and no one has to be anywhere for 8 hours. He put his hand on the back of her neck, under the braids, where the small gold chain sat against the skin. He felt for the ring. He did not take it out. He set his thumb against it through the metal, once, and let his hand fall. "Neir achim," he said. "Tomorrow morning." "Coffee at 8, she said. "You make it." I read the ledger. "Yaksok," he said. "Promise." "Yaksok," she said back. She turned off the kitchen light. He turned off the hallway light. They went down the hall together, to the room at the end, and closed the door behind them, and the anemones on the sill kept their heads up in the dark and waited for the sun. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever been told, my loves, that you didn't belong in a room you had earned the right to walk into? Have you ever kept the receipts, the reviews, the quiet proof, because some part of you already knew the day would come? Mark my words, darlings. Dignity kept in silence is still dignity, and one day it speaks. Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about dignity, quiet power, and awakening, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.